Welcome to the OEE IntelliSuite or OEE Insights podcast. I'm Jesse. I'm mostly been a developer for the last 10 years or so of my life, dealing directly with foreign boards in a manufacturing plant, primarily. Um, so and then a couple of years ago, started this whole business here with OE IntelliSuite and working with the Veti Group and different stuff like that. Um, Primarily we help out manufacturing clients with their reporting needs, alerting needs, making sure everything's secure within the firewall, connecting things up to their ERP system, CMMS, different stuff like that. So um, and I've got Elijah joined with me here.
Yep.
He's one of the lead developers that works for us. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself a
Sure.
bit?
Yeah, so my name's Elijah Symons, and I've developed with Jesse for coming up on 2 years now. Right around when he started the company, I joined as a React developer, and I'm currently at college finishing up my degree in computer science, so that's going well. And yeah, when I joined Jesse, I had some basic experience with React and JavaScript, HTML, the normal stuff. But then what we primarily worked on was converting from .NET to React. So we worked on that, converted a lot of the main products, and then ever since I've kind of been taking on some more responsibilities in the company. So whether that's marketing or even some sales now, it's been a fun time, and I really enjoy learning everything about manufacturing and getting into the space. So yeah, I'm excited to start our conversation today.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I should probably kind of talk about why are we doing a podcast.
Sure.
I think primary reason for me is to talk with different people in the industry and kind of around the industry, whether it be um, current clients, potential clients, be talking with Vorn, people in the Veti group like Jim Salzer. We're definitely gonna have Jim on, and hopefully some people from Vorn. Some of the partners, um, but I think also kind of other parts of the industry that are similar. I mean, there's a lot of like really interesting stuff happening with like robotics. That would be cool to talk with some of those people, and some of the people making the tools that these manufacturers are using would be very interesting, and also to talk to people in different parts of a manufacturing company. I primarily come from that IT side, so I can bring on some of those people that I know, but also people in like shipping and receiving or planning, account management, different stuff like that. It'd just be kind of interesting to kind of get everyone's perspective on it. And for a manufacturing company, manufacturing is at the heart of all of that. That's the whole reason that it's happening. So so I was thinking I'll ask you some questions here.
Sure.
Um, I think coming into it as a developer, out of school, you're kind of a generic developer, right? No one's really trying to
Mhm.
be like a developer in manufacturing or anything like that. So I'm kind of curious,
Right.
like what kind of assumptions did you have when you were getting into manufacturing and hearing of that, and like were they kind of proven correct or not?
Yeah, sure. Definitely starting out, I was thinking, generic developer mindset. I'm just gonna kind of follow the rubric and try to make things work the way I'm told they're supposed to work. And I think that some of the assumptions that came with that mindset were kind of assuming it's pretty easy to develop in this sort of space because, in college they'll teach you a lot of like user-facing applications. So you might build a little website for people to chat in. You might build like a to-do list or something simple and easy that, the user is the focus of. Whereas when I when I started out with manufacturing, I kind of had to learn that's not quite how it is. You're not focusing on user data. These are processes. This has to do with machines. So I think I kind of presumed that this would be more easy and something where it's more about how nice the web app is, how nice
Mhm.
the user experience is, which all matter, but they're just not at the heart of manufacturing. Like these operators are concerned with producing things, not like how nice the sound effects are or how nice their user interface looks.
Yeah.
So I think that's an assumption I took at the start and had to kind of throw out almost immediately, because that might hold you back at some point when you're trying to develop faster and better technology for these manufacturers.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that can be a little tricky to grasp because when you, I mean, pretty much all of us when we're using our software, you're logged in, and it's me who's logged in, right?
Yeah.
Um, at a manufacturing company, it's very common to have just one machine on a line where you've got, who knows, a dozen people working on that line, and they're all kind of connected to that one computer, and oftentimes it's the computer is associated to the manufacturing line, not a specific person necessarily. Sometimes it
Yeah.
is, obviously, but um, and so yeah, it's definitely more about the manufacturing line centered. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. So what's something that maybe surprised you when you were looking at some of our software that's kind of built for manufacturing? Or if you've done any of the kind of competitor research that's kind of
Hmm.
surprised you about that type of software?
Yeah, I think the main thing that surprised me or even kind of just more impressed me is like the robustness of the software. I'm used to creating something that would be more like custom development work or very specific to like a certain platform with past jobs. Whereas this is very much everybody's got kind of a similar maybe schema for the data if they're using Born or something. But in terms of what everyone's using for their like ERP system or other systems on the shop floor that are collecting data, it can really be like any number of a host of devices. So I'm mostly impressed just looking at competitors and seeing the robustness of our software, like how compatible it is with everything that's out there. And how sometimes it does take the custom work to do that, but uh, that was one of the things that surprised me the most was like, oh, this somehow works with both, I don't know, MQTT and like OPC UA. Like, how's that even possible? I didn't even know what those words meant when I started.
Yeah.
So yeah, seeing all the different ways it can plug and play with different operations, different devices, I was blown away by that. I had no idea software could even work like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people like Walker Reynolds are really trying to drive towards is having that compatibility between these different um, types of systems. With he really champions MQTT, but OPC, you can definitely do it,
Yeah.
and doing the UNS unified namespace to try to make something kind of more cohesive out of just kind of somewhat randomness. Everyone's doing it a different way. Um,
Yeah.
I think definitely in manufacturing, you get a lot of vendors that just they want to do it their way, and they don't really care that it works with anyone else's stuff. It's kind of only more recently that that's changed a bit. I think old
Hmm.
school it was definitely much more just like we're just going to do it however we want, and or even like OPC, it's just like, yeah, there's kind of a standard, but everyone like implements it differently, and so it's like not really even a standard. So, yeah, that's definitely something that I don't know. I think really comes from like programmers, especially. It like a very programmer driven thing that you'll see more with
Hmm.
open source software is trying to come up with these standards and protocols that it's like, okay, I don't really care, who's on this side, but as long as you're speaking this certain language, this protocol, then I'll be able to understand you, and we can then go from there and do something with that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks to like some of the potential that exists in the manufacturing space in terms of like the software you're creating and the way you're unifying everything together. Because you'll have lots of different like if you're doing web development, you'll have lots of different frameworks and like protocols to use, but generally like everyone's going to use HTTPS. Like everything's pretty standardized.
mhm.
And it came about that way because of the incredible amount of work that everyone was putting into it. Whereas with manufacturing, I feel like it's lagging behind
Yeah,
by
yeah,
a number of years where we don't have any sort of standardized protocols. We have, kind of a hosh posh of different protocols that we're throwing around, but we haven't settled on one yet. So that getting that to full development where everyone is either using, MQTT or OPC UA or something along those lines, that's when we'll really start to take off in terms of what we can scale and what we can make that's going to help these manufacturers produce.
yeah, yeah. And I think it reminds me a bit. I don't know how much you've done with like the history of like the .com era, where it's just like
Mhm.
you got Microsoft versus Apple versus, Firefox and all this different stuff. And everyone's doing things different ways. And no one really wants to um, have any sort of shared protocols. They just want to do it their own way. And everyone kind of suffered because of it.
Yes.
Um, and, it talking to some of those programmers is just like, oh, that sounds really awful. I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore. And I think modern web programming, which, I don't know, maybe the last decade or something like that, has been just really nice, much better than it used to be. Especially
Hmm.
Internet Explorer basically dying. That really helped things out. And, I think, yeah, manufacturing is kind of lagging behind a bit. I think a lot of those vendors don't really see the benefit for them, and they're more concerned about that bottom line stuff like that. And it's like, well, I want to help out clients and just design things in the right way. Uh, so it just sounded, you hear people like Walker Reynolds, which I listen to a lot, and it's just like, yeah, no, this seems like the right way of doing it. I don't know
Yeah,
why everyone's not doing it this way. So yeah.
for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I guess we kind of talked about some of that. But yeah, what manufacturing concepts took the longest to kind of grasp? I mean, kind of like everything, you've got these different acronyms and just different concepts that are going to be foreign to you. So what?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that some of the basic lingo and basic, protocols like MQTT definitely took some time to learn. Because that's definitely like we said, a less explored space. So when you're going to learn it, sometimes it isn't as easy as, prompting ChatGPT to tell you about it. Sometimes you do have to dig a little deeper into the protocols to really understand them. But I think mainly the thing I've been more focused on learning now, and uh, since it has been almost 2 years now, I'd say it's been kind of the longest thing for me to understand, is like where the value comes from this software. Like what does the plant manager actually use it to do, and what are the real benefits he sees from using it?
Hmm.
Because when you first start, you can pick up on, oh, okay, I've got my OEE, and this is a mix of my availability, performance, and quality, and okay, sure, that's how many parts I'm producing. But getting into the mindset of someone who actually cares about those numbers
Hmm.
and wants to improve them and wants to find a way like to improve them now, that's totally different than making software that just shows the number.
Hmm.
So I think getting into that mindset and understanding how these processes are working, because it is different for different companies. But they all have the general concept of we want to, produce more and waste less in terms of time,
Hmm.
in terms of resources. So getting to a place where I can put myself in their shoes is not only like one of the most important skills
Yeah.
when you're getting into a space like this, but also it's hard to do if you haven't done it.
Yeah. 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 I think that's why you got to get out onto like a factory floor, and
Yeah.
you won't be able to work on a factory floor unless you really wanted to get in their shoes. But um, you at least get a better idea, and I'm going to try to arrange that for you in the next
Yeah.
month or so or whatever. But I think that's especially if you can talk to the operators. That's what's really nice. I mean, you'll get different stuff like, oh yeah, all sorts of different things are wrong. The toilet's clogged or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, I can't do anything for you
Yeah.
there. But um, you get other stuff that's just like, yeah, it'd be really nice if there was some sort of alarm or some sort of, I don't know, some vibration in my pocket or something like that, to let me know, because I don't know that this system is doing whatever, uh,
Yeah.
or whatever the issue is. But you kind of learn some of that stuff, and that's where you need to listen to them, because as a programmer, you could just kind of, there's all sorts of different stuff you can design. I mean, in a sense, you can design an infinite amount of software, but is it actually helping anyone? And I think that's where you got to be on the factory floor to learn that type of stuff.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
And that's generally like a concept that's true of, most industries. It's like the closer
yeah,
you can sit to the customer, the better your product's gonna be, or your solution, the more it's gonna help people.
yeah,
But I think it's especially true in manufacturing, just because of the nature of how it's not quite there yet. We don't have all these standards yet. So you do kind of have to know what you're doing in order to provide that solution.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I listen to different like tech startup type podcasts, and that's one of the number one things is just talk to
Hmm.
people, talk to your target audience, um, because, well, and especially as kind of, if it's a developer led tech startup, which most of them are,
Hmm.
you kind of want to just build stuff, and you don't really want to talk to people, and that's of course what you have to do more than anything is to talk to people
Yeah,
and not really build a whole lot of stuff yet. So
for sure.
cool. Yeah, switching kind of over to schooling and stuff like that, and kind of the modern era. What's
Yeah.
something that you think that school does well, and something that it's not necessarily preparing you for as much as you'd like?
Yeah. Well, I think something that school will do really well for anyone who's willing to put in the work is you will learn a lot. It's not outdated. A lot of the material I'm seeing, um, especially in my developer classes, it's like very up to date. We'll work with Next.js, we'll work with Tailwind, we'll work with AI to create things. So
Well,
they're keeping up to date, from what I've seen. So you will learn quite a lot from school. And I think that most of the learning has to do with first principles too. You'll learn why your code should kind of be, co-located, and you should separate out concerns. All the fundamentals that even if AI is writing most of the code for you now, you know what good code looks like
yeah,
now. So you have that critical eye, and school does give you that. And of course, a lot of experience will give you that too. But school is an excellent way to get that experience in kind of a safe environment where what if you push, horrible code to your project, it doesn't have negative impact.
yeah,
So it's a great way to learn. It's definitely done a good job teaching the fundamentals of software development and even some, the business side of software. I've had a few classes like that.
Mhm.
But I think that, ultimately, it some of the feedback you receive in school is really irrelevant to the kind of feedback you'll receive in the real world. Like the whole idea of having a rubric and getting graded on following the rubric kind of to the
Mm.
T and having it done at a certain time and everything. It's just not how it's gonna really work in the real world. Like, sure, you'll have specs that you need to meet when you're developing something, but generally you'll get rewarded if you do something faster, right?
Mm.
Because if you can ship faster, that means you can take the feedback you got from the first ship and then, integrate that. Whereas if I do my assignments all on the first day they're published, I don't get any extra points.
Mm. Yeah.
So I don't think it really prepares you for the real world in the sense of you're not getting feedback like you will in the real world. And so you're
Mhm.
not actually learning to improve on things that will matter more in your career, like your ability to just absorb the information and produce something that's like minimally viable in a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise I think that getting the computer science major is pretty interesting now where you've got less coding being done, day by day for engineers, and it's more about thinking in systems and thinking even in prompts. It's it's something that I think a lot of the teachers I know are struggling with is kind of where am I providing value to the students now that we've got this new way of writing code.
Mhm.
And some of them pick up on that really well and they stick to like first principles and they'll teach you a lot that way. And that's awesome. I love the teachers that are able to do that. But I see a lot of them struggling to provide like some meaningful impact in their students' lives. So I think that that's one of the things like the universities and just education in general is going to have to tackle, whether it's an online course or school, is how do I still teach when there's so much you can just learn on your own?
Yeah.
What are the things you can't just learn on your own? You have to have someone walk you through it. So I think that's really what it's not preparing you for as well.
Yeah, I mean, you could always learn on your own, and I did quite a bit of that when I went back to school.
Hmm.
It's it's this AI that can just kind of solve the problem for you, that
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, that's good, and you are gonna use that most likely. But yeah, it's not gonna work all the time, and so you gotta know how to do it right, and trying to convince students of that when
Hard.
a lot of them are not, totally mature yet, where they don't really even necessarily know why they're in school.
Mm.
That's one of the things from when I went to college. It's just like, oh, you just go to college. Why am I going to college? I don't know. I just repeat this thing that everyone wants to hear, that like, well, for me way back when was I wanted to be going into horticulture and
Yeah.
have an organic farm and stuff. And and it takes a long time to kind of realize like, oh, I don't have to go to college, and what do I want to do? And I think, yeah, a lot of the students aren't going to really totally understand. It's like, okay, I need to learn how to program well, and that means that I can't rely on the chat GPT 100%.
Yeah.
um, but then also not necessarily going the whole other way, of like, oh, well, I'm not going to use it at all, because that doesn't make any sense. That,
No.
I mean, that gets compared to like a calculator a lot, right? And you
Hmm.
you you got to use a calculator, but you also got to know. I mean, it's interesting because no one ever doubts that a calculator is right anymore.
Right. Right.
Um, I guess the analogy would be you're not always going to have a calculator, although we have phones with us now. So
Hmm.
it is interesting, because some people will say like, well, eventually, if it's just always right, you can do everything, then why do you ever need to know it? Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you still need to know that architecture, and there's still going to be the why am I building this, and who am I building it for, and what do they actually need, and stuff like that. That's always going to be important. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, why don't we pivot to talk a little bit about you, Jesse? And you
yeah,
mentioned that you went back to college for some reason. Why don't you tell us about that? What was it like?
yeah. So my background way back when was originally programming on TI 83 or whatever, and
Oh,
I don't know, algol or something like that. I don't even remember
we
what it.
learned about that history.
Yeah. And I made, just this little program that, like, there's some algorithm where you can ask some different questions about your birthday, like what day of the week or something like that, and then it can like guess what month and day or something like that it is. So I just turned that into a little program. I did some like Java stuff, and I did like AP programming. Um, but I really liked biology and just growing stuff. And I had my own greenhouse business. And so I went into horticulture and was really getting into that. Did a bachelor's and a master's in that. Um, Went out into the real world, and got a job, and realized, like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, you don't get paid a whole lot, and it's literally backbreaking work. And is that really what I want to do? I started to realize that I just wanted to solve problems. And part of what I liked about farming was just kind of the engineering of it. And I was kind of thinking about like all these different machines that I wanted to make to like automate different stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just started to take some different online classes in programming, and from Harvard, actually, and well, Harvard Online,
Yeah.
um, and just had a ton of fun with it. And so did a bunch of that, which really helped because I was able to test out of some different classes when I went back to school, EW lacrosse. Was able to kind of skip the gen eds because of some transfer stuff, and got a degree, got an internship at Inland Packaging, um, which is a label printing, manufacturer. Um, and then, yeah, just was doing a bunch of different stuff for them, but part of it was getting into the foreign boards, and getting into
Yeah.
manufacturing data, and different interfaces for the operators, and hearing what issues that they had, and trying to help them out. So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And so when you first kind of started at Inland Packaging, that was about 4 years ago, right?
Originally started 2016. Um,
Oh, okay.
so that's
About
10
10
years
years.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, so how has the space changed? You've been in manufacturing for 10 years. Obviously always on kind of the software side of things,
Yeah.
making sure that, machines are running and you're getting data from it and making decisions based on that data. So how has it been changing, from what you've seen 10 years ago to now? Is it a lot different? What's the difference there?
Yeah. I think, you know, some of the tools that we were using then, as a manufacturer who, has a limited budget. I mean, and probably every manufacturer has a limited budget, but um, so you can't afford the best of the best necessarily. And so you make certain things custom. You buy some stuff when it makes sense, and piece some different things together. And you got some legacy stuff, that you got to support, and it might not make sense to just kind of redo it. Is that, some of the stuff, as a modern developer, you're like, man, this is like Windows XP era, like super old looking, um, and just not great. And some of those things they allow you to program kinda, but it's in old scripts, VB scripts, and what was the other one? Fox. Oh, I don't even remember. It's something that's like hopefully non-existent anymore,
Yeah.
um, and I think it's just kind of with everything as you go on, you start to slowly modernize more and more, and
Yep.
you've definitely seen that with Vorn, the V1 days. It's got an older UI for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and then nowadays it's that more modern React, and we're doing that as well, obviously. Um, and I think the developers coming in making custom software for a company or making different reports and stuff like that, everything's just kind of slowly getting a little bit more modern.
Yeah.
But it takes time, because that costs money, and for a manufacturing company, you always got to remember the product is not software. The product
Yeah.
is whatever the product is. It's labels or whatever you're making. Um, and so that's a fundamental difference that when you look at maybe some of your lead developers in the world on YouTube or whatever, influencers, a lot of them are at those what's known as FANG companies: Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Um, their products are all software, and so they spend a ton of money on their developers, and the cost of that software to produce is quite high. And they do all sorts of really cool stuff, um, and to make cool software, and that's neat. Um, but ultimately, you're not really going to do that in a manufacturing plant because it's not going to pay off. Um,
Yeah.
you're kind of more looking at the minimum work to get something done. And as a developer at a manufacturing plant, you just always are swamped. There's always a backlog. You'll never not have a backlog,
Mm.
because if you did, you're doing it wrong. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing. I think that also, along with that, going off of what, is kind of the difference between what a lot of us developers would see, and, the user and software is the product and everything. Do you find that that's kind of where a lot of your value lies in what you're solving with OE IntelliSuite, and just at your time at Inland Packaging is kind of that sweet spot between knowing how the manufacturers work and produce and what matters to them, and knowing how to program and build those things.
yeah. I mean, I think that's one of our key points that we can compete at is that we'll do
Yeah.
custom dev work.
Mm.
We'll do basically whatever it takes to solve the problem. Um, a lot of the companies are pretty big. They really don't want to get into that,
Hmm.
because they can't scale it. If you got some whatever little ERP that is very specific into this one industry, they're not going to be able to sell that to anyone else, and that work
Hmm.
is wasted. Not necessarily that they're not making some money off of it or whatever for the work that they charge, but it's just not enough, and they don't want to get into that type of stuff.
Hmm.
But we're totally happy doing that. I mean, we're small, um, and that's something that I really like doing is helping people out, um, in whatever way it takes to solve the problem, and not being kind of limited by, oh well, our stuff only does this. Well, I need to
Hmm.
do that. Okay, well, we don't do that. You know, I don't really
Yeah.
ever want to say that. I want to say, yeah, we can do that. Now it's going to cost you some money, but we can do that. And being someone who, I don't know, I just don't value having a mansion or a Lamborghini or whatever. That's just not my value set in life. And
Right.
so it's like I'm just not going to charge you that much. And it's not that our products or that my labor is not worth it. It's just, I don't know. I want to help out all the different manufacturers out there that I can, um,
Hmm.
and I'm fine with not making tons of money. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, um, so that's definitely one of the main things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And like, what do you find that a lot of manufacturers are like, oh, I really did wish I had that, or you know, if they knew they could have this, that would kind of be, oh, or we need to get this on our shop floor as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And I know that there are a lot of companies popping up that are trying to solve these problems. What are some of the problems, like the main ones that they're addressing? I'm sure we could talk about yours and of course some of the competitors. What are the areas that are being developed in next that kind of the manufacturing industry can look forward to or needs to be aware of?
Yeah, I think kind of something that'll probably always be an issue. I mean, even in the age of AI, is integrations between these different systems. Um,
Yeah.
you know, a manufacturing company kind of has to choose whether they go with a generic ERP like Microsoft Dynamics, which one is going to cost you an arm and a leg, but then
Hmm.
two is going to be generic. It just has to be generic, um, or something more specific to your industry, um, whether that's label printing or whatever.
Yeah.
There are these different niche ERPs that are specific to that. And that can often make a lot of sense for a manufacturing company to do that because there's just less customization that needs to be done. And
Mm.
customization costs you a lot. It means developers, and,
Right.
and they're going to cost you a lot. And you got to keep up with that. You know, you're the ones now who own it. Um, so, but you go with that very specific ERP, and then now to integrate it with anything else, it's like, oh well, no one has an integration with that because no one's ever heard of your little ERP maiden, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, so that's where we can help out with, is
Hmm.
doing those integrations and connecting that up to different reporting tools, whether it's our own with Explorer, or if you're using Power BI or Tableau, we can do that. Um,
Yeah.
Connecting it up where we're doing our imports of jobs and parts,
Hmm.
into Work Tracker, which is our way of having operators punch in, and tracking operator time, um, or getting different alerts on things, with
Yeah.
with OEE Pulse, um, being able to see um, the scheduled jobs with the foreign data, together. That's really something that we're continuously striving to do, is to just kind of glue these different systems together so it's more cohesive, um, and that manufacturing data is at the heart of everything. So it needs to be available to everyone, and that's definitely something that you see, at these companies, is that, maybe the data is there someplace, but no one really knows, or the supervisors don't know, or they know whatever, some report that someone made for them, but they don't have it all. They don't have all the
Yeah.
data. Um, we were talking to Paul Osborne, a good friend of mine, and he was talking about how he just made this simple view in SQL Server that all of a sudden, he gives that to an executive, and they're like, "Wow, this is so amazing!" And it's just like, yeah, no, this is the data that we have, and it's just like they just don't have access to it. I think that's still a problem, Um, you know, these vendors know that, and they're trying to make it better. Um,
Sure.
it's just when you get into real companies, especially that have been around for a while, which a lot of manufacturers have, there's just a bunch of legacy stuff, and you got
Mm,
to figure out how it all works, and it's not pretty. It's definitely not pretty. Um, and that just it just means typically it's going to mean some custom work to do that. Um, and that's what we help people do. So
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think also too with a lot of these legacy systems and older systems, the longer you wait generally in software to upgrade, kind of the harder it is. You either got to rip everything out and start new, and there's not there's not a ton of easy ways to like migrate to new equipment, new software and everything. So I think that's like another one of the pain points we've seen with manufacturers is just being able to slowly upgrade or just smoothly upgrade their systems across time.
mhm.
But yeah, going along with our kind of
Maybe I'll chime in there because
sure,
you know well, obviously to promote a little bit we can help out with that especially when it comes going from the V1 to V2 Vorn boards,
right,
and that's something that I definitely see. It is uh, these companies went all in on Vorn, some of them pretty big, on V1, and it's and they built a bunch of custom stuff around it. And
mm,
so it's not just as easy as swapping boards out or swapping, the innards of the boards out or whatever. It's, you changed a bunch of stuff about how the Vorn works. And so that means a bunch of work to do.
yeah,
And so that's why we developed the converter, the OEE data converter is to allow a smoother transition into that V2 world where you're bringing your data over. It's now in the V2
mm,
schema. We're actually even playing around with the idea of allowing the V2 data to still be viewed in the old way, in the V1 schema way, just for reporting,
yeah,
because the V1 schema is not the greatest in terms of data schemas, um, but doing some of that type of stuff to make it easier for people to then start to move over to V2. Um, and that type of stuff is not glamorous, or to move from legacy to the new stuff. Um, and the way that V1 does things, it's not as nice. The API is not really an API, and and so that's what we help people out with is trying to move from legacy to more modern. So
yeah, right. Yeah, that is definitely like one of the bigger things that can be very costly if you're going to try to do it in-house or just yeah, kind of just swap them in and out and see what happens.
yeah,
It's you're gonna end up with more problems that way, some potentially, or if not, just a really big headache that can continue for a long time. So
yeah, and I know
that's definitely
I know companies that they're like, yeah, well, maybe it'll be super easy. We'll just get a V2 board, and they've had a V2 board since they've come out, and no one's used it for anything because they played
hmm
around with it a bit, and they're like, oh, this isn't going to work for what we need to do. Because when we talked to IT, we realized, oh, there's a bunch of other stuff, and things kind of
yeah,
totally changed, and it's not going to be that easy. So
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Going along with more modern solutions coming out and helping people migrate and stuff. There is a lot of talk around artificial intelligence and what it could mean in every industry ever, and of course, it's changed a lot since ChatGPT came out.
mhm.
What are some of the ways it's kind of seeping into the manufacturing industry? I think that one of the main ones that comes to my mind is like the detecting anomalies or just differences in the data that are awry or just not correct.
Mhm.
What are some of the ways you've seen or integrated yourself with artificial intelligence, and how is that playing out?
Yeah, I think everyone in terms of vendors is trying to put AI into everything. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've seen any of the like CES, the big tech show that happens every year in Vegas. There's so much AI in everything, and AI
Yep.
is making your coffee and all sorts of stuff. And some of that makes sense. Some of it's just to say AIs and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
is not necessarily bad. It just depends on how you're doing it. Um,
Hmm.
and it's just a tool. It can do a lot of cool stuff, and it can not do some stuff. And
Yeah.
and I think especially when you get to being some sort of source of truth, that's really where people have run into issues with what's known as LLMs, large language models, which is your Chat GPT and Gemini and stuff like that. Is some companies will put those as this chatbot that then can kind of tell you what's happening, whether that's as like a support bot or being able to order something or whatever. And you see some companies where they get into trouble with that because the LLM has not been tested well enough, and it tells them stuff that's not true. It just wants to. It's been instructed to help be a helpful assistant, and and I guess sometimes that means telling people things that aren't true. Making stuff up, and
Hmm.
it all just comes down to testing, really.
Yeah.
Kind of with anything, um, that you need to design this stuff well and test it out. Um, and so, our chatbot that we're rolling out is there's a lot of testing there to make sure that it's not going to just tell you anything, and then if it doesn't know the answer, it's going to tell you that it doesn't know. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's more helpful because there are definitely things that it can help you out with. Um, I think it's more helpful, to say like, yeah, I don't know, than the other way around. I mean, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's one of the biggest. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest drawbacks with LLMs is
Hmm.
they'll tell you stuff when it's wrong. Yeah, when it gets into because the other thing is AI in the general space, just kind of all gets lumped together. Um, LLMs are definitely a type of AI. ChatGPT is a type of AI, but there's machine learning, where it's really kind of mapping, kind of a model or a pattern, trying to find a pattern in your data, but not just if people remember from high school math or whatever, some sort of linear line or something like that. It's for problems that are
Hmm.
much more complex than that. That's where you can start using machine learning, and there's all sorts of different algorithms for doing that, and it's pretty cool. And it's kind of gotten all lumped together, but it's quite different. You don't talk to it, and it's very different than ChatGPT. But that's what we're using for the anomaly detection system, where you can get outliers, which is big spikes in data that are pretty obvious, that it's wrong. But if you don't have any sort of system for telling you that, then you might miss it. But also kind of when it's not so obvious, and there's some kind of more localized weirdness. Um, but when you look at kind of the whole breadth history of data, you start to realize like, oh, that seems strange. Um, that's where really those anomalies, and machine learning is needed, and it shines. Um, I think there's a lot of different areas where machine learning and LLMs can help out, and we'll be looking into that more and more. That's obviously what people want. Um, and, you definitely hear from clients that that's what they want. Um, but you got to do it right, and we're gonna try to do that. We're not just gonna rush something out the door just so we can slap AI on it, and we're not gonna just put AI on anything for no reason. I think
Yeah.
some people say like, oh, we're just gonna use ChatGPT for everything. You won't even have code anymore. You won't have websites with code. You just talk to it and it'll just spit out whatever you want. And it's like, I don't know if you want, you know, Amazon website to be changing all the time per person and all this stuff. And,
Yeah.
and when you get into that in terms of the technicalities, it's what's known as non-deterministic. Um, Basically what that means is, yeah, like it's kind of changing, or it could potentially change
Mhm.
every time. And a lot of stuff that we do, there's just no reason for that. It's just totally fine to just have code. And you want it that way. You want it to be very consistent and very testable. I mean, LLMs are not very easy to test in comparison, um,
Mhm.
because they might change, and you switch a model, and that's definitely going to change. Um, and so I think there's still going to be the business intelligence tools, the Power BIs and our OE Explorer and these different websites and stuff like that. The dashboards the way that they are, because it's
Yeah.
just like, well, I want to view the data to see how the week went. Um, and just the easiest way to do that is just a Pareto chart or a timeline. Uh,
Yeah.
sure, I think the LLM can definitely help because it can kind of summarize some stuff for you. I think that makes sense for sure. But to say that everything else is going to go away, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. It'll be interesting
Yeah.
to find out, though. I mean, we're all kind of in for the ride here. So,
Sure. Yeah. 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 Thanks for sharing. It sounds like so AI is going to be more of like an addition rather than replacement for some of the tools that are out there and some of the things we're doing. So
yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, I didn't have any other questions related to programming. I guess is there anything else you want to talk about, or any ways we could, leave the audience with a way to contact us or check out more?
Yeah, I think that was kind of a good part to stop on. AI is big in the news, so I think that's cool. Um, yeah, well, obviously, if you want to get a hold of us, oeintellisuite.com. You can Google OEE IntelliSuite, um, and you get all our contact info there. You get information about the products. We have open pricing. That's one of our big selling points. Um, and you can contact us, schedule a call, and we'll set up a demo with you. Real soon here, we're going to have live demos where you can actually use the product. And you don't have to. Well, I'll probably have you send me your email uh, to be able to access the demo, but um, you don't necessarily have to schedule a call, and some of the pain points, if you try to use some of the other competitors software, they guard it pretty quite a bit, and it can be hard to just
Mhm.
like, hey, I just want to play around with this, and I just want to know what the pricing is like. It's very hard to get that. um, so yeah, I think that's good. And I want to thank you for being on. I think we'll probably
Sure,
do a few different podcasts together if that's what you want to do,
that sounds great.
and interview people. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So
Yeah, well, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
yeah, and I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next time.